We have Garry Kasparov sitting with great intensity on the chessboard. He's already won the Clutch Chess Legends 2025 by winning the second rapid game of today. But there are still two blitz games that are left to be played, and there is definitely some pride at stake. Garry, you can see how focused he is. He wants to win this game. Vishy comes in. He hasn't won a single game in this match. He'll be definitely looking to beat Kasparov here. He has nothing to lose now. Already, the score is 13-5 in the favor of Garry Kasparov. The pawn moves to c4, and Garry now trying to think about his first move. He goes pawn to b6, opening up his queen. Vishy takes the center, pawn to e6. The bishop opens up here, and Vishy now brings his knight to g3. This is a very simple setup that Vishy has gone for. He's going to put his knight on c3, maybe bring his bishop out, e3, bishop d3. It gives a vibe of some kind of a Nimzo Indian that we have on the board. Now Garry pauses a bit and tries to figure his way out from here. What should he play? Should he develop his bishop here? One of the problems that is inherent in this setup is the placement of the queen. It's on the side of the board, and the strongest piece needs to get active, otherwise you can really be in big trouble. Vishy pushes his pawn to f3. He wants to play e4 to build a big center, and Garry can stop it in multiple ways. He can also let Vishy do that, but he can push his pawn to d5. He can push his pawn to f5 as well. Focusing in, Garry has always played a bit slow in the opening in this format because he tries to get completely used to how his pieces are, tries to understand where they should go to, and there you see him completely focused. Meanwhile, Vishy Anand has always been the more practical player here, building a time lead on the clock. But Garry has equalized later on. I think Garry is basically deciding whether he should let Vishy play pawn to e4 or not over here. He has built this nice battery, but the pawns on g2 and f3 are like granite against this bishop. About to make his move, and he plays pawn to f5. Now, this stops the pawn from coming to e4. Vishy can bring his knight out to c3. Takes a bit of time, and look at Garry's clock. He's down to 3 minutes 36 seconds. Vishy has a minute's lead on the clock. e4 is not yet possible because pawn takes, and you can take it with the bishop. The possible moves here are knight c3. He brings his knight to c3. A good move. And now Vishy wants to play pawn to e4. Build up a center here. Also, his bishop could come to g5, attack the rook here. So Garry plays bishop b4 and now pins the knight. Vishy pushes e3. Generally, in such positions, b3 could also be a very nice idea as the queen defends the knight and you can activate your queen. But okay, e3 is not at all a bad move. You have to be slightly careful about the bishop sacrificing itself on the f3 square. But that's not a problem right now. So Garry is thinking, should he take on c3 here? Should he bring his knight out on g6 and castle? Few options are building up. At the same time, keep in mind the queen on a8, not very active. He brings his knight out to g6 square. And bishop comes out to e2. Vishy develops and is ready to short castle now. And look at Garry looking at the clock and he's like, okay, I need to speed up. One of the things that, and he castles. Vishy also castles here. And Garry takes on c3, pawn takes c3. Now look at Vishy's center. It's beautiful. He also has the bishop pair. But this is a typical Nimzo Indian setup where you can get your bishop out to a6, knight to c6, knight a5 and start pressurizing this pawn on c4. Will Garry go for it? Meanwhile, Vishy has played this opening so confidently. That's because now with the tournament having already been decided. He's just blitzing it out. Pawn to d6 played here. Bishop comes up to d3 by Anand. And what will Garry do next? Well, he brings his knight to c6. And, well, you can play queen b1, you can play pawn to f4. There are many such possibilities. But also remember, you can push your pawn to d5. Try to take advantage of the fact that this e6 and f5 structure is slightly weakened. As Vishy Anand locks in, he has a huge time lead. He pushes his pawn to f4. So now he does weaken the e4 square. The diagonal also opens up. But on the other hand, he has blocked these pawns. He can push forward with e4 on the next move. And Garry's time goes down below 2 minutes on the clock. Now Vishy has a solid 2-minute time lead. And Garry goes knight a5. He is attacking this c4 pawn. And as we just said, bishop a6. But Vishy changes the character of the game. He pushes his pawn to d5, weakening this structure. Garry takes the pawn. And now Vishy chops off the pawn on f5. This bishop is attacking the knight. The knight defends the bishop. And bishop on c1, slightly passive, but if the pawn moves forward, it will be dangerous. Knight takes pawn, queen b1, getting the queen into the game. Now putting pressure on g6, and Garry shaking his head. He can see that at this point, he has maybe a very nice position, maybe even an extra pawn here with the knight on c4. But what about his queen on a8? Completely out of play. And Vishy, with 3 minutes 55 seconds, incredible play by the Indian champion here. Garry now needs to be careful about how he plays this. He goes rook d e8, fantastic move. In this tournament, we've seen Garry Kasparov being under time pressure and finding the best moves. Vishy chops off the pawn, gets his queen into the attacking zone. And now with knight jumping into f5 or h5, this pawn can be quite weak. He gets his queen into the defense. If Garry can get the queens traded off, Vishy is in big trouble because the bishop on c1 is absolutely passive. It's doing nothing. The pawn on e3 is weak. It is attacked. But Vishy is like, I'm going for the mate. This is checkmate on g7. So that pawn needs to be protected. You can either go rook f7 or queen e7. These are the possible options here. He's taken away the f6 square. And meanwhile, Vishy is at 3 minutes 39 seconds. Garry Kasparov down to 45 seconds on the clock. He plays his queen to e7. The position is around even. But it's time to get another attacking unit in f5, f6. Will Anand find that? Well, of course he does. The lightning kid is on fire. f5 comes in. The queen moves to f7. Queen g5. He brings his queen back in. And now, of course, you don't want to trade the queens. The rook can move to d4 and g4 now. Rook e5 played by Garry. There's no threat to take the pawn on f5 because I can take it back. Queen f5, there's a mate on g7. So rook d4. The rook is lifted up. And you want to go rook g4 next. He plays his queen to e7. Vishy can now calculate, is f6 possible? Not really, because rook takes g5. F takes e7, I take on f1 and then rook e5, and I'm able to stop the pawn from moving ahead. Once again, never ever trade the queens. If you trade the queens here, I think black has solved all his problems. So it's important for Vishy to now figure his next move. He could go queen g4, but the best move here is queen to g6. But no, if you go queen g6, he can put queen f7, offering the trade of queens. But maybe then you can do this. Queen g6, bring the queen to f7 and then come back to g4. It's a bit confusing. He does go queen g6, queen f7, comes back. Queen to g4, bishop c8, attacking the pawn on f5, rook f4, defending it. Somehow, Vishy Anand is playing incredible chess. He's playing so fast. He's at 2 minutes 33 seconds. Garry is down to 30 seconds. He needs to play faster. But I think we are seeing Vishy, like how we've seen him before in his younger years. Pawn to c5 played by Garry, seeing that there's no real progress that can be made because pawn to f6 is met with the queen hanging on g4. And so for Vishy, perhaps the best move here is to move the queen away from here. But there's also another idea, rook f3 to g3 or to h3. That's a very nice move to try and get the rook into the game. He's thinking, and Garry looks at the clock. Queen g5 played and a blunder here by Garry Kasparov. He goes queen e7, but now Vishy Anand needs to pause and realize that this move is different from the previous queen e7. The reason? f6. Now, the thing is, earlier when you took g5, fe7, rook takes f1 was a check, but now there's a rook on f4, so you can actually make a queen here. That's the difference. Will Vishy find f6? And also, yes, he finds it. Pawn to f6 played, rook takes g5, rook takes rook, and he makes a queen, and Kasparov resigns with a smile. Vishy Anand scores his first win of Clutch Chess 2025. The Legends. Amazing victory for Vishy Anand with 1 minute 38 seconds still left on his clock.